I'm very excited. I got two experts with me today. We're going to be talking all things ops and post-investment for your fund. I'm going to go ahead and shout us out where you're calling in from. Let me open up chat here. Stephanie, what's up? How are you? But let us know where in the world you're calling in from. Usually we get people from at least a couple different continents, so we'll see how we're doing here. We got Washington D.C., Bay Area, Minneapolis. I'm in Chicago, Boston, Lagos. There we go. Hi, Olivia. So today I'm really excited for this panel and this group. I'm going to go ahead and intro everyone. I'd consider both Lacey and Kristen friends. Are we friends? I think we're friends, yeah.
Absolutely.
So Lacey is a partner. She's in operations at 01A based in California. For those of you that don't know, 01A is a venture fund founded by some of the team of operators of Twitter, so former CEO and COO of Twitter. They're helping entrepreneurs build great companies. So far, two funds, I believe 45 or so portfolio companies investing in early stage founders. Lacey, welcome. Did I miss anything there?
You nailed it. We just raised our third fund. We're crushing.
Woo! Awesome. Yeah. Third fund. Congrats.
Thank you.
And Lacey's been a great customer and partner of Visibles now for over a year. And we also have Kristen joining us. Kristen's, as we heard, based in the Bay Area. She's the founder of Strut Consulting and Let's Talk Ops. Before Strut Consulting, she was the director of operations for 3 different venture funds. And Let's Talk Ops is an amazing group of operational professionals. If you haven't checked it out and you're an operational professional, please do. Some of the most successful venture funds in the world are members there, and they've been a great partner of ours as well. Kristen, thanks for joining.
Awesome. Glad to be here. And thanks for being a great partner to both sides of the fence.
Yes. Just to kick things off, what from each of you, what gets you excited about operations? Why have you chosen this to be your profession? Kristen, you've started a whole firm based on this. So I'll start with you, Kristen, and then Lacey, I'll have you go next.
Sure. I mean, I think the big gotcha for so many fund managers is they basically have 5 jobs. They have to raise a fund successfully. They have to then nurture those LP relationships long-term. They have to deploy capital successfully and nurture those investments long-term. So we got four so far. And then no one tells them that, I actually have to run this fund like a business. I have to have that, fundamental business 101 mindset when I'm both building the infrastructure, the foundation, and then also as the fund grows and matures and goes through multiple fund cycles, things change, needs change, and the fund operational structure has to evolve with it. I did it in-house a handful of times, the 0 to 1. I worked at a really big shop to start. I was at NEA for 5 years, so kind of got the best of both worlds in terms of scope and scale. And it became very apparent as the emerging manager space was exploding that fund managers needed operational help, not only to manage that sort of 5th leg of responsibility, but also, a lot of VC intel is kept behind closed doors and it's not for public consumption. So, that was a lot of the impetus for starting Strut and wanting to help fund managers tackle that operations and set them up for success and then navigate it long term.
Awesome. Have you found that? Have you witnessed funds not be successful because they haven't had great operational rigor? Funds can obviously not be successful if maybe they make bad investments, but have you seen operational rigor be a reason why maybe a fund hasn't raised additional capital in the future?
I think, at the start, you can get by with a lot of duct tape, glue, and staples. And a lot of early fund managers, especially if you're raised in the 2010 decade, did so. But as you mature, it becomes a scope and scale problem. Trying to instill strong operations when you've got a litany of stuff to clean up from prior years is a huge undertaking, and can be quite messy, and is bad for reporting and data and a million other things. But I think especially in this market right now, LPs are being very particular. They are scrutinizing in a way that they haven't in the past, and the market is so inundated with competition, seeking those LP allocations. So I think, where we see, operational excellence be a game changer is, how you built your firm, how you leverage operational practices and procedures for how you're reporting and managing all of your information, and also how you're presenting yourself to LPs in terms of, how your data room looks, how you're running the processes for a fundraise, how you're running the processes for your deal flow and your portfolio management. Those can be definitive game changers in a fundraise when you're being fine-tooth combed by especially institutional level LPs.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And Lacey, how about yourself? You were recently, maybe not recently, but within the last year, I believe you were promoted to partner at 01. How to talk to us about how you got to your role and your favorite part about being on the operational side of the fund.
Yeah, Kristen said so many amazing things. I think for me, I came from a product background and business process management background. So best of both worlds in tech for coming into operations in a venture firm. I would say that especially at my firm, coming from GPs that were former operators, they super value that ability to build product and bring software tools together to create the most efficient way to operate. And for us, that looks like constantly evolving and changing and growing and getting better. And to Kristen's point, we started out with a Google Sheet and we've gotten much more sophisticated and we have so much runway to get better. And for us, it's about being able to remain dynamic, stay quick, have information available at our fingertips. And that just really lights me up to be able to build these really cool tools that power our firm and keep us on the forefront of great deals and putting together great value for our LPs and portfolio companies.
Awesome. Thank you. Clearly we have some experts today. We're excited to dig in. Just some housekeeping. This is going to be recorded, so we will send this out to all of our guests within the first 24 to 48 hours, typically with the write-up. We'll also include any resources we might mention and link to those. If you have any questions, please let us know in Zoom chat. We'll either get to them real time or at the end. Bella on our team, she's standing by and happy to help facilitate those questions as well in the chat. So please feel free to engage with us there. So today we're going to talk through kind of common operational challenges at funds, addressing issues from a team and prospect perspective, improving your operations with technology and tools. Probably the biggest question, how do you measure success? And then some advice for first-time operational hires, whether you're that person or maybe hiring for that role. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. Just to get started, we'd love to hear from the audience. Feel free to jump in and just let us know which part of VC ops are the most challenging for you right now or you've experienced. If you want to throw those in chat, we'll try to address those and weave those in throughout our convo. So please throw those in there and we'll get back to you within this presentation. But I'm going to flip to the next slide as we wait for those to come on in. Fund admin, that's a big one. We'll definitely talk about that. So here's some common ones we talked about in our pre-meeting. We have siloed, disorganized information, hard to get buy-in, maybe from partners on improvement, scrambling during audit, and then anything else that you guys write in chat, we'll make sure to cover as well. Let's get started maybe with operational improvement, Kristen. I think that's a big one. Why is it so hard to get buy-in for operational improvement and just getting buy-in in general?
Yeah, I think, and Lacey can definitely expand on this as well, but I think two sort of fundamental problems are one, getting buy-in from a use perspective. Operational tools are great and powerful and amazing, and so are the practices and procedures and things you put in place as a firm, but they don't work if there's not collective team buy-in, and getting that can be difficult, especially as partnerships get larger. So finding that tool or that procedure, that workflow that everyone's bought into and is following along with on a regular basis and holding each other accountable for is critical and can obviously be a challenge. And then I think, historically in venture, there are a lot of amazing tools out there, but they're not necessarily all beautifully built for exact VC needs or the exact way we track data or deal flow or the way our industry works. So a lot of pain points can be around trying to find the right tool in the sea of options, or the right set of tools, or your tech stack, so to speak, in the sea of options. And making sure that, you've got, again, the alignment to use them all correctly. A lot of them are really expensive. So finding ones that, are within budget, especially for, sub $30 million funds, finding, the costs can be painful to front for really powerful tools. So a lot of those are what we see in the day-to-day with especially emerging managers.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of like different stakeholders involved that you mentioned, like, and how do they differ, and what do they care about or focused on?
Yeah, I think I really recommend, almost like mapping out your stakeholders. If you're someone who's in a position of trying to make these critical decisions on tools, what to use and when and how much to pay, doing a market map of what your options are, pros and cons, doing a cost analysis, and then mapping your internal stakeholders. Who do you need to get buy-in from at the GP level, and how do you go about doing that to get to a yes, and then also to get to an implementation phase. I think that getting GP buy-in is obviously the most critical piece for all of this. And that sometimes can be, just giving them the right data sets and the right information to make an informed decision. It can also be, knowing how to play the game, play the politics within the fund, and getting everyone to work together. That can be a more finesse and skill set, and maybe a long-term relationship thing. But those are some of the fundamental pain points that we see when you're trying to get buy-in and get those key stakeholders internally to stay engaged in what the plan is.
Yeah. Kind of last question for you, Kristen. We talked about end goal and end game and how that relates to some of the things we're talking about here. Like, can you give us an example of like different end goals that people might have in mind at a fund, and like why it's hard to align everyone on the same end goal?
Well, VC, I guess by nature, historically has been a cowboy sport. Everyone's, chasing their kill, so to speak. And I think that, and people have different work styles, different personality types. So getting alignment in that regard can be a challenge. I think end goals can be different because of that. Some people just want things that make their workflows easier. Some people are very data oriented, and really care about the numbers. And, I think it's important to go back to what your fund's thesis is and sort of what metrics you're trying to prove out in your investment strategy. And use that as your North Star for making these decisions, and getting everyone, using that as the sort of tool or selling point to get buy-in on why these operational work streams and why these operational tools are so important. Because at the end of the day, we all answer to the LPs, and they are going to want to see, you prove the pudding, and that you have the numbers to back it up. So I think that's a really good way to get end game alignment and stakeholder alignment as well.
Awesome. We got some questions coming in about fund admin. We'll wrap this slide with those. But before we do that, Lacey, we talked about scrambling during audit. We might have some folks here that haven't gone through an audit yet, or will go through their first one next year. Can you give us some insight? Like, what do you mean by scrambling for an audit? Like, what is needed to prepare for an audit?
Yeah, there's the very basic investment confirmation. So having contacts in order for each company of who is going to actually complete those investment confirmations, where usually the third party auditor will just basically send out a template form to all of those contacts and say like, hey, can you confirm the investment amount that 01A has? And then there's like the more tactical stuff that is happening as far as like audited financial statements and all of the background effort that goes into that. In addition to that, just where your valuations are coming from. And I think that is like one underutilized area is as you are doing markups or markdowns or just general valuation reporting, having the evidence behind that not be so tedious, especially on the CFO side. There, for us, and this is going to be unique to every firm. And to Kristen's point, like you have to really know what your thesis is and like where your organization is going and what your secret sauce is. So for us, like we want to remain very strategic. And so if our CFO is bogged down with answering all of these audit related questions, meaning having to go dig through data to get the answers, then he can't be focused on what our portfolio is currently doing and what kind of investments we should be looking ahead to make to pick the right puzzle piece for the next, portfolio company. So that being said, there's many tools that are out there, to Kristen's point, in that sea of things. And I'll just give you a real life example. In our tech stack, we have things like Omni for the document management piece. That's going to like essentially ensure that on every transaction, we have every legal document that we need. Your SPA is correct. It's fully executed. It matches the cap table, all of the things like that. And then on the metric side, Visible has been a tool that we've implemented that has saved us tremendous amounts of time, especially during valuations, because we're mostly doing that based on we're investing in Series A and B. So we're, looking at current numbers and improvement to do that. So having that at our fingertips and automatically collected, and we have such greater compliance utilizing Visible as a tool than we've ever had before on collecting quarterly financials. That has helped us tremendously. So we aren't scrambling anymore in the audit. I basically give access to all of our outside tools to our auditors and say, like, here, you have viewable access into Omni, you have viewable access into Visible. That's where everything lives. Have at it and come back to us with questions.
Yeah, awesome. So the other thing we talked about is kind of siloed, disorganized information. It sounds like, Lacey, you built some pretty incredible tooling to give access to everyone at your firm to ask questions kind of whenever they want. Were you guys finding that information was being siloed? And I guess if so, how did you go about tackling that problem? Just talk about how you went from disorganized to kind of organized and remove some of those silos.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that we are constantly evolving and improving here because it still happens, right? Like it still happens where GPs are getting an investment update or some sort of information that would be really great for the rest of the team to have that data on, and it's living in their inbox and not accessible. I think tools like Affinity and making sure every single person in our firm is a user of Affinity, whether or not they actually log in and access the system, doesn't matter to us, but the fact that we have the data capture on their email so that we can go into the portfolio company, say like, okay, what was the last update we got from them? And then you could easily see, oh, it's in one of my GP's inbox. And then I can ping them and say, hey, can you forward this on or the EA or whomever. But I think just like getting greater visibility into things is so critical for us to work as a team and have all the information needed to break that siloing. So I would say Affinity is our number one hack for that. The number two hack is just finding the right communication tools for your team size. I think that for us, we tried Slack, but we were only a 5-person team, and it just was like too hard because the tool that we're most interacting on is text. And I know that if you're an RIA, that's like bad, and we're not. But I think for us, that was like our thing. We weren't an RIA. There weren't really a lot of security provisions. We're small. To Kristen's point, it's like cowboy country. And so how do you start to take things that were happening? So I just went to the next closest tool to email because we're on Google Suite. And I said, okay, now we're going to institute Google Spaces and we're going to try it for a year. And if it doesn't work, we'll scrap it. But like, it's basically just like Threads. And I created some spaces for people to have chatter off of text. And now that our team has grown and actually doubled, it's like the historical information is there and we've done so much better. It doesn't mean that we're not copying that information and then putting it into Affinity on the side. Like there's still that added extra manual effort that we haven't figured out yet, but it's just getting people to like interact in a space that's transparent across the organization.
Yeah, awesome. Fund admin, we have a bunch of chatter happening about fund admin. Let me go to the question and scroll back up here real quick.
Maybe do the Stephanie question and then we can go fund admin.
Oh yeah,
Stephanie. I can speak
Yeah.
to that.
Go for it. I don't want to speak to my own product, so I'll
Sure.
let you do it. Let's see.
So our founders are struggling to understand paying for a service when they could just type in an email. We need the founders to be willing to sign up. For us, we don't utilize it like that at all. Actually, sorry, Mike, we don't sell this to our founders at all. And I know that that's an option, but we do that like very passively. If they came to us and asked, we would definitely hook them up. But essentially, we utilize it on the request side. And so historically speaking, we would email them for data, to your point, and this just essentially automates that email to them. So all of the requests are going out in automated emails. It's very easy for the founders to reply. I mean, for me, it was a really simple implementation because people were used to seeing the emails from me asking them for their financials. And so I just sent them an email and said, hey, listen, the next email you're going to get looks like this from a new tool that we're using. It's one click. You click in, you key in the data, you attach your docs, you send it. And I also sold it as a little bit more secure. You're not sending it over email anymore. The link is like really specific to you. And like now you can securely upload your financials. Boom, boom, boom. We're done. We don't have to harass you. It's all good. You know when to expect it. And it just really put a process that was not bureaucratic around it for us. So yeah, that the angle, yeah, good. The security angle really, it only takes one thing to really sell it. So that was what we used. But yeah, I've never encountered a founder being confused about needing to sign up or anything like that, just because it's so easy. It just clicks right from their email. There's no confusion around signing up or needing to pay for anything.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, 85% of founders providing data to their investors are doing so without a visible account. So that's kind of our big, I think, differentiator, is that it's meant to be completely frictionless for the founder. They don't have to pay. They don't have to even sign up or have a password. We all handle that through email. So thank you for that. Kristen, fund admin.
A can of worms.
A can of worms. So if you're a sub $20 million fund making a decision to work with a third-party fund admin, maybe do it versus doing it in-house, can we talk just through the challenges of fund admin? I'm sure we could spend hours on this topic alone, but any quick maybe best practices or tips or places to send people to kind of help figure this out?
Yeah. So I think, and I'll stay pretty tactical on this because I think, we can debate the pros and cons of the various options on the market, but I think regardless of who you're working with, the most important thing you can do when you onboard a fund admin from the jump, or if you're having trouble with your fund admin, is you need to get in an operational cadence with them. And by that, I mean, you need to invest in the relationship by committing to meeting with them on a regular basis, whether in the beginning it's more frequently, and then as you get more comfortable and get into a healthy rhythm, maybe it's once a month. Really depends on you. And Dave, you're right. Here we go. You've got to put in the work to make the relationship successful, just like you would if you hired a new employee. You can't just put them at a desk and hope they succeed. You have to invest in their, they're getting them onboarded. They need the institutional knowledge, and they need to get up to speed. And then we need to get in an operational rhythm with them. We see a lot of problems and pain points in this category. Some of the fund admins are completely strapped. They don't have the manpower to be able to provide the white glove service that they used to. And then, options like Carta are definitely more tech driven and tech heavy, people light. So, you really have to, work with your team or your assigned, people from your fund admin to get into this cadence. Two critical things are responsiveness, being responsive to their emails, getting back in a timely manner, giving them the information they need to do their job. The longer you defer to respond or getting them the information they need, now we start the snowball of a backup and a backlog. And the next thing you know, it's quarter end and you're mad, they're frustrated, and everyone's both unhappy and then not delivering on time. And then, beyond that, I think, just building a rapport, there's going to be some, double checking of work, making sure that what they've got, the communication was clear, what they have on hand is right, and doing it on a regular basis, meaning, monthly or quarterly, just depending on, what the cadence you're at with them is. So you're, again, not creating this massive backlog of both information and execution.
I think we just leave it there.
Sure.
That was great.
Lacey, you want to throw anything in there?
Yeah, but we'll let Lacey go.
I mean, we have had a really successful third-party partnership, and I will say, we're religious about meetings, even if we don't have anything to talk about. It's just getting that quick FaceTime, even if it only takes 3 minutes to say, yep, no investment activity, being religious about that. Seconding Kristen's point about quick responsive, I'll say that for us, it's just giving them access to everything we have access to. So being as transparent as possible, where files are, when an investment is coming down the pipeline, when you're about to do a capital call. The sticky points that we have had, and I will say they're few and far between, have been around spinning up a really quick SPV. And all that goes to show you is that their lead times are just a little bit longer than we would like them to be. And so anything that has been done in error there is definitely just because we're trying to do something really rapid. And so if you kind of respect the timeline and understand, and everyone has their rule set and expectations, I think that you can have really successful third-party partnerships and keep them outside of your house, which is very nice, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Yeah, happy to go deeper on Q&A section if someone wants to.
Yeah, for sure. So feel free to leave some questions here. We're going to get into improving operations, kind of talk about team and process. We talked about in our pre-meeting, what team dynamics lend to the smoothest, most efficient operations and how we get there. How Lacey helps keep, the 0-1A team aligned and informed, and kind of key meetings or communication. We just did a great one about fund admin. Maybe we can touch on some other key types of meetings that we can use to improve our operational cadence. Let's talk about maybe just since on the topic of meetings, we just talked about fund admin. Lacey, what kind of meetings do you have at 0-1A that are in place to help your post-investment ops?
Yeah, we have a really non-traditional portfolio meeting, and I think later we'll go through what the agenda looks like for that. And then we also will really do targeted meetings. So if we have a specific portfolio company looking for additional assistance, we will create subgroups within our team of a tactical hit group that's going to go after, let's say, BD. And they're just launching or have a new GTM motion, and we want to connect them with people that we know to help get feedback on that motion, something like that. That would be something that we just dive in head first, and we operate really as a team. No man is too small on our team. If you know something about the topic or you know someone, you get to participate. And so that might be also unique, that everyone is really horizontal at the firm. But I would say we really don't like to have meetings that are purposeless. So there must be action items related to the meeting, or takeaways, or a strategic brainstorming session or something like that. We don't just have meetings to run through something that could have been done over email or text or something like that. And then I think obviously we'll do post-mortem meetings that is also super helpful. So post in investment onboarding, we'll sort of talk about hits or misses throughout the tactical process, and then also how we supported them right at the beginning in the first 3 months of being onboarded.
Awesome. That first part was interesting about creating a team, tackling a specific problem. How does that actually get done? Who is leading the team? Is that you, Lacey, as someone appointed you are the go-to person for this particular team, like how do you actually spin up all of these smaller teams, and who's in charge?
Yeah, so we're a sub 10 person firm. And so I think maybe it's also easier because there's very few of us. So we have one key partner who oversees like network and talent piece. And she's going to be like the go-to for anything related to post investment support. So she's usually always involved. And then we'll have either our EA that supports the GAPs, who's like really tactically knowledgeable about all of the lists and affinity and the way we track things. She'll typically be involved more for the like accountability piece of the GPs, but also for the reporting piece. And then I'll typically be maybe involved in the organization of ensuring that we have the data, correctly tracked, and or if it's something like BD, there's tools that we can pull in their list, their pipeline list, the company's pipeline list, run it through our system and see who we know on that list, things like that. So I'll be involved on like the data processing operations front. But yeah, I would say sometimes it looks like having our CFO involved. And so that would be a different tactical team. Like now we're trying to, help with a business problem. And so then we sort out a more business function related team. And then each of our GPs have their own strengths. So I think it's just great to really know every single person, what your strengths are within your firm and where you can like go to someone and people know what they can come to me for. And whether that happens in an offsite where you go around the room and you say, this is what I'm really good at. And like, these are my superpowers, use me for them. That's really helpful too. And then it helps just having all eyes and ears out. We like to be proactive with our firm. So if we hear something or get an email or see something on the street, IRL, we might bring it back to the firm and say, hey, I heard this. And like, I think that you could be really helpful in resolving this. And like, it's always surprising and like a surprise and delight, I like to say to our companies when we can resolve their issues.
Yeah, you talked a lot about founder and portfolio support there. Like, how do you close the loop with the founder? Is it simply like email, like, hey, we're working on this, we'll get back to you? Like, how are you keeping the dialogue open and then I guess closed with the founders that you're supporting?
Yeah, the closing part is hard. The opening part is easy, right? Like it's really easy to be like, hey, I have some people I'm going to send you. And that happens a lot from our GPs. And then they come back and they're like, hey, who can I send them? And so then you've like got to have the full follow through. And the way that we find out about that sometimes is in different means, whatever is most efficient for the GP. But I would say tracking is really key to that. And I know that Visible is coming out with like an investor ask piece that's like releasing in the next couple quarters. But for now, we've been tracking in various different ways. I actually just created like a new internal tool application where people like can go in and see the investor ask, search them, edit them. So if they like have a good CRO candidate, for example, they could search the ask and say who's been on the lookout for a CRO. And get a list of the companies and see if there's any matching fits there. I think, again, making information transparent, not keeping it siloed, teaching your internal team where to go and look for things also, and where to edit things and where to submit things. All of those are important processes, internal processes and workflows to make it all work and function.
Yeah, great. You mentioned, some tools in Google Spaces and some other things. Anything else you would mention while we're on the topic of how you keep the team in line and informed? You think we kind of covered everything you wanted to mention today?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll say is like, what is your command center? And that has been like the question I've been asking for the last couple of years. Like, where do people want to operate from? Is it like their email? Is it like, what is the number one place they want to go to for information? And so I just kind of brought all of our tools together into an internal app, sort of looks like an intranet, but I built it with Glide Apps, no code tool. They're not a portfolio company. This is a free plug for them, but it's excellent. And then it also has the ability to integrate OpenAI. So I've now integrated some backend databases so we can ask natural language questions about our internal data. But like for our GPs, it's like they don't remember how to access Omni and what it's even for. So if I have a screen that shows our portfolio company and says like, here is where you get the overview of the company information and what board seats we have and all of that information. They can click a button and it takes them there. That's like the command center now. And so we've just built that as a web and mobile app. So things like that just tie everything together. I think you have to that looks different. For some teams, it's going to be Slack. For some teams, it's going to be Coda. For some teams, it might just be a Google Sheet. So knowing where you're operating from is really key.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Kristen, let's talk about maybe team dynamics. You're involved with a lot of teams and been part of teams and helped shape and form teams. What's a common team dynamic that makes the post-investment operations a challenge?
Or I can talk about challenges, but I can also speak to positive things.
Sure, let's do both.
Yeah. So I think things that I see really successful on the post-investment side operationally is a lot of funds I've seen some wonderful new founder, new investment onboarding processes, thorough checklist in terms of, dotting every I and crossing every T, but also adding a really meaningful human element to it by doing an onboarding call with the core founding team, talking them through, the team on the VC side, what everyone's skill strengths are, or, who to go to whom for what resources as a fund you provide, or, partnerships that you have, expertise that you have that you're have available to deliver to the founders, what to come ask you for, and how you can be a value add investor. I see that funds who really take the time to go through those paces, have a much more meaningful relationship with their founders. I think they also have a much more honest and candid relationship with their founders. They tend to be the ones who know about, hopefully when things are going well, but also, to be the first call when something's not going well. I see funds who put in that extra elbow grease in that area, make a big difference. And in that operational mindset, like the fund has a whole process by which they are onboarding this new investment, giving them access to community and giving them access to resource and doing this onboarding call. And then oftentimes we'll also do sort of like a drip campaign afterwards of engagement to, sometimes when you're sitting on a Zoom with, 4 different GPs from a VC, it can be completely overwhelming. So having somebody on the back end, usually an ops or head of platform person, following up and, recapping the call, recapping the links to all of the nuts and bolts we just talked through. I'm your resource if you need X, Y, and Z. And if you can't find something, I can help you chase it down, et cetera. Funds who really go about that in a thoughtful and thorough way, I think not only have better relationships with their founders, but, just run a tighter shop. Places where I see funds making mistake post-investment on a kind of deep ops data side are, not having a process to document all of the deal documents that are flying around, or storing them in the right places. Yes, your fund admin's going to have a copy, but you, in theory, as an operational best practice, should have your own backup to the backup. File structure internally where you're keeping all of these things. Tech is beautiful, but it can implode. It's not perfect. So just being that sort of Murphy's Law, anything that can happen, can go wrong, will go wrong, mindset when you're managing all of the deal data and documents. And then, really starting to use tools like Visible and to track all of your, your deal data and what your portfolio as it grows, not waiting to do all of these steps and implement these types of technologies. The longer you wait, the more of, again, the mess you have to clean up, which I know I mentioned earlier, but I really want to emphasize it because it's not so bad when it's 30 investments, but when we're getting into the 50 to 80, you really see the back start to break in terms of, going forward, how messy and complicated it gets, and being able to, again, pull accurate data becomes critical. And if you don't have it in the right places and you don't have a process internally that you're running through every time, not only for onboarding, but for updating, you can start to get in the muck quickly.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. You mentioned founder onboarding there in that workflow. Bella, you mentioned here in chat to me. Lacey, what are some best practices that you've kind of witnessed, doing this now for many years, in terms of onboarding best practices for getting founders, acclimated with your portfolio and your fund?
Yeah, we tried to tailor our onboarding to the founder's personality type and sort of like why they chose us to invest in them. And I like to think of our companies as customers. They chose us just as much as we chose them. And so for some founders, it looks like a big show, and we come in and we'll bring half of our team and go to an all hands meeting and have one of our GPs speak at their all hands meeting, and then do deep dives with each of their internal like sub teams, or maybe a product team or a sales team. And really be hands on in the first few weeks to months. For others, maybe they have a more tentative approach with investors and they really want us to stay out of their business a little bit. And so it just looks a little different. And maybe we become besties with a chief of staff or an EA instead of the founder at those companies, because then we at least have some inside information and can like hold strong to that. So like we'll, try to ensure that we're speaking to them in the way that they want to be spoken to. And I think there's no one size fits all. And so for us, that's been the biggest learning. Like we just can't like create a process and hit like copy paste. It doesn't work like that. And things also change as far as like platform. This is like such a good topic for Kristen because this is what she does a lot of. And for us, I think that we try to be like the anti-platform in that we're not building the same thing that everyone is building, and our approach is just more hands-on, like human driven, which may or may not scale. We have yet to find out. We hope it does. So
Kristen, how do you respond to that? Talk to us about platform.
I mean, I'm a big believer in there is no right way to do this. Meaning you shouldn't. I love Lacey's point. Like, we're not going to do it the way everyone else is doing it because that's not in our DNA. And a lot of what we advise managers on, regardless of size or stage, is, to really do some soul searching and some deep digging internally about, and as a team, about what is your unique value prop, what is your skill sets internally, what do you bring to the table, and figure out if that's something that's worth deploying in any way, shape, or form to your portfolio companies. And if you do decide to do something, do 1 to 2 things incredibly well, rather than try to do a whole smattering of things just to be, keeping up with the Jones of VC. Like, don't bother. You're better off doing an amazing X rather than XYZ and ABC. So we spend a lot of time with the companies or the funds we work with, just trying to help them hone in on what that is, and then trying to help them deliver it in a really effective and impactful way. But I think your strategy is the best strategy by fund. One size does not fit all, and a lot of what drives decisions on what to do and how to do it are rooted in manpower and budget. Which obviously go hand in hand. And again, going back to this topic of getting team buy-in, especially at, smaller funds with lean teams, if you're going to try to do a portfolio service offering or a platform offering, everyone needs to be bought in and everyone needs to be contributing. And yes, you may have a head of ops or a head of platform who's, pushing all the levers and buttons and making all the planes and trains run on time, but the whole team needs to be contributing for it to be successful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I have like a real life example I can give on that, which is when we first started in VC, we thought that like the position you had to have was like a recruiter talent person, and you had to have someone that was like constantly stockpiling talent because that's what the big firms have. And what we learned was that is such a big job and requires so many people in such large teams. But the value that we could provide was actually getting involved with that manager or, the hiring person for the executive position and understanding what kind of person they needed for the role, and then helping them better craft their job description and really deep diving and training them on like how to find the exact right fit. And then having some like partner search firms that we could refer them to that were trusted partners with us to help them find that particular person if it wasn't someone we already knew in our network. And so tracking our own internal network, knowing those people well, and then being able to help them craft the right person for the job and then send them on their way with another firm. That kind of got us out of the weeds of being like the actual recruiter.
Yeah, perfect. That's awesome. Super tactical advice. And I think both of you, what you touched on, staying focused on what's true to you, and, whole-assing one thing and not half-assing two things, I think is always good practice.
Mm-hmm.
For Lacey, you mentioned this, and I think this is super interesting and tactical, and I think will be enjoyed by a lot of our community. This is your portfolio review meeting agenda. Can you just walk us through, because you said it's a little bit different, can you just walk us through this, and then we'll kind of wrap up here with some best practices for new hires and any Q&A, but I'd love to just kind of touch on this slide on your portfolio meeting review.
Yeah, we like to look at this sort of as a product, right? So when you're developing and delivering a product, like you're trying to sell at some extent. And so to us, it's like, what are the positions that we have left in our portfolio to fill? So we started out with sort of kicking off that investment strategy. Here's what we've deployed. Here's how we've deployed it. This is where we said we were going to invest and we told our LPs we were investing, and here's what we actually did. And so let's really be conscientious with the investment team in this meeting, where we're going and what we're looking at and what we're really hot on. And then we do a really deep dive on kind of categorization. And so we call them heavyweights, lightweights, and potential drivers. And basically we say what the heavyweights are the fund or the portfolio companies who are on their way. They're doing a great job. They're delivering, they're meeting their goals. Maybe they've raised some additional rounds and they're sort of on their way, and they require less work as they get bigger and greater, or they just encounter different problems. And by less work, I mean support from our end. And then we become more cheerleaders for them. And then the lightweights are the ones that are just the risky companies that, you took a big bet on and maybe things just didn't pan out for you, but not spending too much time trying to resolve those issues and focusing on the potential drivers. So you really have to, some people do this in the P1 through 3 prioritization. However you do this internally, red, yellow, green, we kind of do that visually, but just knowing where you want to spend your time, I think is really key. And then we'll say, okay, great. Now that we've identified those categorizations, where do we really want to put more money to work with the reserves that we've held? And so that will be the next conversation, sort of by looking at those potential drivers or the heavyweights and determining strategically where we might want to preempt around. So it's a really heavy strategic piece of the meeting. And then we get into okay, great. What's on the table that we can proactively do to support the potential drivers right now? And we might do a company by company discussion. We might look at companies we just haven't checked in on in a while, and we have their metrics, and we're just assigning things out to say, okay, over the next quarter, why don't you dive in really deep with this company? We just really haven't touched bases with them, but we have some unique secret sauce ways that we do that. But mostly this is a real general look at how we run that meeting. Yeah,
this is awesome. We'll make sure this is part of our wrap up. Thank you for sharing this. Real quick before we move on to wrap up and then some Q&A, but real quickly, so how often do you have this meeting? Is it monthly or quarterly or kind of ad hoc?
Yeah, I mean, since we have implemented Visible, I would say we try to make sure that we have a good set of data to actually work from in order to kind of do this categorization. So if all of our data is outdated, we'll punt the meeting. But if we get a good number of financials in, we try to do it every 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it'll get punted out a little ways, but at least this is happening once or twice a quarter.
Yeah, awesome. We talked on tooling, so I think with 9 minutes left, I want to skip and actually just talk about how to measure, because I think it was a common thing we heard. And then we can wrap up with some Q&A. But I guess, we talked about all of this beautiful tactical advice on all things ops, post-investment ops. How should I think about measuring whether this is working? What are some tactical things that I could take away today being yes, this is working, it's not working, or this might be working? Kristen, I guess we'll start with you.
Well, I think working and not working, I think number one is, user activity or user engagement to cost. And I think beyond that, to Lacey's point, giving things a fair go. Just trying for something for a month isn't going to be a good tactical metric on, whether or not it's working. Giving something a fair shot, whether it's 6 months or a year, and committing to using it. And then I think highest level, what are the goals? Agreeing to a set of metrics or larger goals as a firm, that you're checking in with, maybe on this regular cadence meeting that Lacey just talked through. Like, are we on track with, is this tool working the way we need to work? Is this operational practice working the way we need it to work? Let's do a quick team check-in, get some feedback, and then be willing to iterate or pivot when it's not. I think is also a critical way to navigate towards success.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Lacey.
Yeah, we did our first founder NPS, which was like super, super helpful. I think surveying your founders, even if it's like something simple like a Google form, we used a third party and just sort of wanted to do like a heavy deep dive because we were into like, year 4 of our fund in existence and felt like it was the right time. We've established some practices and could ask some real questions, but I think just getting your portfolio companies familiar with interacting with you in that way so that you can improve is really helpful information that if you're not doing, you should collect on some level.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk about advice, maybe for first-time platform or ops hires. Like what any kind of takeaways as we wrap up today, as maybe I am this person. I am the first person at my fund that is, tackling platform or ops, or maybe the flip of this, I am hiring, my first platform or ops hire. Like, what is some tactical advice, Kristen, that I can take away, saying like, I need to make sure I'm doing A, B, and C, or thinking about A, B, and C for this role?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this goes back to sort of the fundamental pieces of getting, like going through the hiring process and picking the right candidate for this hire, having a tight JD, even if it's something that evolves over time, and and then having really clear roles and responsibilities outlined. It's definitely a setup for success metric at the GP level. And then going back to this meeting cadence thing, agreeing to meet with this new hire on a regular basis, both as a team and to the key stakeholders one-on-ones, for moving projects forward, getting critical feedback and positive feedback, hopefully, kind of all that, best practice operational cadence at the GP level makes a big difference, because I definitely see ops and platform hires struggle when there are not clear lanes of which they're supposed to be swimming in, and they're not getting face time with the partners, the key stakeholders in the firm on a consistent basis. But I would say to the operators out there, best number one piece of advice is be kind to yourself. This is a drink from the fire hose position. You not only have to get your sea legs in venture if you don't already have them, but then you have to get your sea legs in the role. And for people who are new to venture, new to the role, it's a year to get your VC sea legs on average, and then about a year or two to get proficient at the role and kind of really own it and get your arms around it. So a lot of grace, a lot of patience, take your vacations. But I think like critical tactical things are just being super organized, having tools that you're using to manage all of your workflows and processes and to-do lists, and holding yourself accountable. And then, leveraging, there are so many powerful, amazing tools. I know we kind of glazed over the tech stack, and it could be a whole webinar, but, there's so much that you can do now, with what we have, whether you're using Notion, Airtable, all of the softwares and platforms out there. And then all of them are hot and heavy to integrate AI and ChatGPT into their tools. I know Airtable just announced, Google's about to do a big announcement. So figuring out ways to make your and using Zapier, figuring out ways to make the work that you're doing automated and simplified. eliminating errors, hopefully, in doing that, and really becoming a master of the tools, because I think that's what sets apart the A players from the B and C players, people who really embrace what the technology is and really figure out how to leverage it in a way that gives them speed, accuracy, and a bigger footprint.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. That was an amazing way to wrap. Lacey, any kind of final piece of advice? You know, you've been in this role now for 4+ years, and anything you've seen that works well that you would want to make sure to share?
Yeah, I second everything Kristen said. And the last point she made about the really becoming the master of the tools that you have, I think that's the hardest thing, because you could easily be discouraged when no one else logs in after you built this beautiful thing. But what I will say is, keep going, just start somewhere and keep going, because eventually you'll be able, technology changes every single day and new things launch. And, my original Airtable that I built and just continued to maintain painfully so has now powered the whole back end of our natural language chat GPT model. So I think, you just have to really believe in what you're doing, and every time you pick a tool, make sure that you're super psyched on it and you can keep the stoke high, because eventually people will start to get in. They'll be like, oh, wow, it could be a year later. It could be, I think it took 3 years for one of my GPs to get into Affinity. And then he's like, well, this is cool. I can find stuff I need, so whatever it is, it just, you have to really remain committed to it. And I think also, just to Kristen's point, some days I'm like, am I going to get fired today? I don't know, because I haven't heard from anyone in days or weeks or months. But just continuing to push forward through that. I think that's a common thing in venture world. Sometimes people are not thinking about their internal teams in the same way that they would in building a company culture at your startup. So you are the culture. You get to bring that to work every day.
Yeah.
You could probably spend a whole another hour on just that topic alone.
And also leverage your communities. Don't be alone. Join a community. There actually are some now. And back when I was doing this, there were none, and you were really spinning in your circle by yourself. So leverage your hive mind and the people who are in the trenches with you.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much. If anyone in the audience has questions, please send them to myself or Belle. We're happy to help answer or route them to Lacey and Kristen. Lacey and Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your wisdom. You guys are